Hello there. The demonstrative solidarity to reduce the number of boat people on the English Channel is still not showing any effect. At the beginning of the week, the British Ministry of Defence announced the arrival of 8 rubber dinghies on the very day that Paris and London agreed on the multi-million pound upgrade of the surveillance of the French Channel coast. According to the BBC, the number of migrants arriving in Britain by boat has already climbed to over 42,000 in 2022 and is expected to more than double the total for 2021 by the end of the year, and that was more than 28,000. While only 50 Albanian citizens dared to cross the channel illegally in 2020 and only 800 in 2021, their number rose to more than 12,000 in 2022. And according to the British government, from May to September, they made up 43% of the boat people who arrived. British Home Secretary Suella Braverman recently spoke somberly of an invasion of our south coast, sending members of criminal gangs among the new arrivals. Albania's Prime Minister Edi Rama was not the only one to be outraged at the discrimination against the 150,000 Albanians who work hard and pay taxes. We are not criminals, proclaimed the protest banners of the Albanians who demonstrated in London on Saturday against their stigmatization. The question of the reason for the increasing number of Albanian boat people is not only of concern to the British media but also to the public in Albania. Like 32 years ago, the world sees us again as people who come in boats. That was said by the former opposition Prime Minister Sali Berisha. In fact, after the collapse of Albania's Stone Age socialism in 1991, photos of people heading for Italy aboard overloaded freighters went viral. In 1997, thousands of Albanians once again sailed across the Adriatic in fishing boats when there were civil war. And that's what we call the riots in the country. The situation in the EU accession candidate has improved considerably since then, but Albania, which has shrunk by more than 30% to 2.9 million inhabitants in 3 decades, has remained a country of emigrants. Above all, poverty, high youth unemployment, and a lack of prospects in the provinces, where wages are usually well below the average income of 431 euros per month, are the reason that over 60% of Albanians have plans to emigrate. The reason for the current urge to go to the island are complex and also have to do with Brexit. Since Brexit, there has been a shortage of staff on construction sites, in craft businesses and in local public transport on the island. The demand for illegal workers is high. The immigration authorities also have to check the asylum applications of people who have entered the country from EU countries, and the chances of recognition have increased noticeably. Similar to 2015, when tens of thousands of Albanians tried to realize their dream of emigration by applying for asylum in the West, social media is fueling a snowball effect. The lower tractor prices are also a reason. While illegal migrants had to shell out up to £20,000 for the previously usual truck passage on the car ferries, the rubber boat passage are now offered for £2,000 to £5,000. And because of that, British Home Secretary Suella Braverman and her French counterpart Gérald Darmanin signed a joint declaration on November 14th in Paris to combat illegal migration. Backed by British investment of €72.2 million, the agreement includes a range of measures aimed primarily at tackling boat passages in the English Channel. Read critically, however, the paper regulates little more than the continued existence and further financing of existing cooperation formats. It is making some tactical adjustments and is consolidating a cooperation in the so-called Calais format that began in 2021, which means the inclusion of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. There is a complete lack of measures to improve the humanitarian and human rights situation of the emigrants either. Rather, Braverman and Darmanin solidify their structural causes. Since 1986, bilateral agreements between France and Great Britain have formed the backbone of the current border regime. Starting in the 1990s, several intergovernmental agreements to control and combat undocumented migration were concluded based on regulations for the Channel Tunnel. In the 2010s, agreements were made at ministerial level that reacted more specifically to current developments and established several border police cooperation formats for information exchange, situation assessment, and support in criminal prosecution. In addition, a budget was set each time, with which Great Britain financed measures on French territory. In 2018, the Sandhurst Treaty confirmed the validity of this policy in the post-Brexit era. And this contract is the basis for the agreements made since then. The current agreement is the fourth to focus primarily on combating boat passage. This happened for the first time with a joint action plan of January 24th in 2019, at a time when the crossing of a few hundred people in Great Britain had triggered a moral panic. Great Britain made 7 million euros available, but a budget already existed on the basis of the Sandhurst Treaty, which was only increased. On November 28 in 2020, the interior ministers of the both countries concluded a second agreement with a volume of 31.4 million euros, and on July 20th in 2021, a third of 62.7 million euros for measures in 2021 and 22. In 2021, the Johnson government also made several demands on France that went much further and were not accepted by Paris. On the one hand, Great Britain wanted to reach an agreement with France on the return of deported persons after Brexit, because they already also left the European Dublin system, and a British-European successor arrangement seemed hopeless. Second, Britain needed French cooperation to carry out planned pushbacks at the sea border, which are illegal, by the way. And third, Johnson accused France of not adequately policing the northern French Channel coast and demanded British patrols on French territory. The political dissent escalated around the same time as the accident on November 24th in 2021, in which at least 27 people drowned and others remained missing. In the wake of this deadliest accident to date, France invited British Home Secretary Patel of that time to a conference in Calais, where she only negotiated with the home ministers of Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands on combating smuggling networks, which were said to be primarily to blame for everything. This conference is what is meant when the current agreement refers to the Calais format. Since the agreements only finance a limited period of time, the current step comes really as no surprise. The investment of 72.2 million euros, which appears impressive at first glance, is not surprising either. It hardly goes beyond the previous financial framework, which is further put into perspective by inflation, and is likely to flow primarily into ongoing personnel and equipment costs for the French police and gendarmerie. The financial leeway for further measures is therefore rather small. This indicates that the British government does not currently give top priority to expanding the border regime on a bilateral level. In 2021-22, the replaced Johnson government focused on projects that seemed spectacular and communicated in a populist manner with a national framework. These included the tightening of British immigration laws, pushbacks at sea, the use of the military in the English Channel, and the program to deport Channel migrants to Rwanda. The pushbacks never materialized, and the Rwanda program was stopped by the European Court of Human Rights. If the British government actually believed that it could create a game changer at national level, it failed again. Emmanuel Macron and Liz Truss announced the now signed agreement on October 6th on the sidelines of the Prague summit of the European political community. In their statement, however, they primarily dealt with other issues such as cooperation on energy supplies and support for Ukraine against the Russian aggression. The topic of the English Channel followed as the last point. They further agreed to deepen cooperation on illegal migration within the bounds of international law to tackle criminal groups trafficking people across Europe, ending in dangerous journeys across the Channel. Interior ministers should conclude an ambitious package of measures this autumn. Leaders agreed to reinforce cooperation with near neighbors, including through an early meeting of the Calais group. That's the group I mentioned before. The agreement was negotiated and concluded in the context of a crisis in the anti-migrant paradigm. While the national measures presented as a game changer came to nothing, the number of successful boat passages since the beginning of the year exceeded the 40,000 mark on November 12th, marking a new high, and it's already at 42,000. Great Britain is therefore investing in a border regime that, despite all the securitirization, has never been as permeable as it's today. The Anglo-French agreement is characterized by dynamics of perseverance. The border regime will remain as it is, but will be adapted in detail to some current developments. The agreement consistently falls short of the last year's UK demands. It does not include French support for the questionable projects that Great Britain has promoted as a supposed game changer at the national level. The French don't want to break the international law. The multilateral Calais format does not represent a real turning point either, as the border regime continues to be organized bilaterally. Even the now extended use of a Frontex aircraft since 2021 does not change this. Nor did Braverman and Darmanin create the legal framework demanded by Great Britain for the deportation of boat passengers and other refugees to France or the EU. Their text doesn't even mention this question. However, the British Immigration Minister later reiterated before the House of Commons that the government was still seeking a returns agreement with France. I can tell you already that won't happen. Ultimately, the new agreement will perpetuate the inhumane situation of exiles in northern France and continue to constitute a lucrative market for smuggling services. This is also reflected in what is missing. The two states did not agree on the creation of legal alternatives to small boats. They did not agree on steps to improve the humanitarian and human rights crisis in northern France. And they did not define a framework for political renegotiation involving civil society actors, international organizations, or those infected themselves. Calais remains synonymous with an inhumane border, and border politics remain in the Calais format. And so taking back control of our borders, really good job done in Britain. And now they even want to take control of the French borders, which will not happen either. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.